for joining us for our midday devotional. I'm Brother Bruce McClure, the minister at the Prince George's Church of Christ, located at 70 here in Landover, Maryland. Uh, you may have noticed, especially if you were on our Zoom call last night with our midweek devotional, that there was a breakup in the signal. And those who tried to tune in by Zoom, the video audio feed intermittently was coming in and out. Um, I have an idea about what caused that, and even today the signal is moderate. But recall, about 80% or so of the working population is working from home using their own Wi-Fi. And now in Prince George's County, almost 100% of the academic population is being educated at home using their home Wi-Fi signals. And this is just my hypothesis, is that the bandwidth, the signals are just being overworked. That's my layman's uh, translation, interpretation of what might be going on. Because truthfully, before school started back, we were not having this type problem in sending out our live video streams. So I want you to know that we're doing everything we can internally to mitigate this problem, but it might be bigger than we imagine. This week we've tried to talk about 5 things that couples will likely differ about. We talked about values, we talked about goals. Yesterday, the schedule was to talk about finances, but I had an out of office appointment scheduled at 10:15, and I did not get into the office to do the video stream until almost 1 o'clock, probably about 1:45 or so, or 12:45. So we're back today, and we'll cover the differences that couples may have regarding finances on today. So let's start by giving at least a workable definition about finances. Finances is the management of assets as they relate to banking, the allocation of funds, the investment of funds, the procurement of funds, meaning how do you get the funds in the first place, and the settlement of debts. And it could be expanded, but that's sort of a capsule definition of what finance management is all about. Now, coupled with that, keep in mind that couples, because they come from two different families, two different cultures, uh, couples and their financial differences basically kind of rise to the top. And they rise to the top fairly quickly in the relationship. The number one area of conflict in most marriages appear in some shape, form, or fashion to be connected to finances. People say, well, it's intimacy, not really. It's time spent, not really. Uh, it's our church attendance, not really. At the top of most couples' list in terms of differences within a relationship, it is finances. The Utah State University had a professor years ago by the name of Jeffrey Dew. And Dr. Dew found that couples who argue about money are at least once per week. Arguments about money at least once per week were more than 30 times more likely to divorce than couples who only argue about finances once a month. That, to me, that's a phenomenal finding. Couples who argue about finances weekly have a 30 time higher probability of having trouble leading to divorce in their relationships. Dew also found that among women, it was finances and sex that were the best predictors of divorce. Dew found that finances, without exception, was the biggest predictor of divorce among men. His findings were presented at the National Conference of Family Relations in December of 2009. So it becomes very important for couples to understand the critical impact that financial differences will have on the relationship. I think it becomes imperative, especially for Christian couples, to be aware of what money and finances can do, detrimentally do, to a relationship. See, it is indeed true, the love of money, the heart being fixed on, the love of money is the root of all evil. Isn't that amazing? Not the lack of money, but when couples perpetually have disputes over money, you've got to trace that to where is it coming from. In 1995, Jan Pahl, P-A-H-L, wrote an article entitled His Money, Her Money. And what Pahl did is examine the control and the allocation of money within a household. Let me give you 3 or 4 of his findings, or her findings. Number 1, male-managed systems were associated with higher income levels and with male privilege in terms of decision making and personal spending of money. Male-managed systems. The higher the income in the household, the more likely it was that the money was managed by the male. But secondly, Jan found that female-managed systems were associated with lower income levels and with greater financial deprivation for wives. Now, what that means is in that relationship, the husband was more likely to deprive the wife of access and of the financial resources. That has nothing to do with who earned the money. So let's say the wife is the primary money maker. What Jan would say is that might be true, but that male somehow still wants to regulate and deprive the wife of access or usage of that money. Here's a third finding. Equality between husband and wife was greater where money was pooled and managed jointly. In premarital counseling, I think this is where most couples part company with me. They don't get up and walk out. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But I mean, there's an emotional disconnect because many individuals come from a family history of this is mine and this is yours. And I am here to tell you, in the majority of homes, that is a recipe for financial disaster and relational disconnect. Please ask me why. It addresses trust. When you have those separate things going on, neither party really knows what the other is doing with that separate pot money. So you've got a pot over here for bills, and you've got a pot over here for this is mine, and then you've got a pot over here for the other spouse saying, but this is mine. So we put into this common pot, but what I have over here and what I have over here is not this pot's business. That is a recipe for disaster because there's no accountability in those side pots. You don't know what the person is doing with their money. In fact, if you ask, they're going to tell you it's not your business. What is your business is to make sure that what I committed to putting over here is here. But what I do over here is none of your business. Now, that could also stack up to salaries. As long as I put what I committed to put in this pot, it's none of your business what I have. Your question should always be, did you deposit over here? That's a recipe for disaster in a high majority of relationships. And I know culture to culture, that becomes the norm. But for the person in the relationship who is not accustomed to that, they may go along with it, but that does not mean they are content. That does not mean they are satisfied. It just means this is the way it is, but it never means, and I love it. This is another little tidbit that Jan found, was that only 1/5 of all households were studied. And this was phenomenal. That's 20% study. But with that, isn't it phenomenal to see how disconnected relationships can lead to divorce and contention? A study completed by Creighton University Center for Marriage and Family found that time, sex, money were three primary areas within a marriage that leads to divorce in couples under the age of 30. The finances centered mainly around the amount of financial debt bought into the marriage rather than the financial debt jointly ascertained by the couple. So in Smart Money magazine, it showed that couples' primary area of differences centered around, in terms of finances, debt that possibly will ruin the stability of the home, education, and needed household goods. When marriages dissolve over finances, the problem, uh, the spender, the problem spender, is not fixed. They just move on with the same problem. Leaving because of the expected better financial management will simply move into the next unsuspecting relationship. Here's what I'm saying. A person who is a poor manager and a person who wants to micromanage the funds coming into the household, and yet as they micromanage, they still get all of their needs met. See, micromanagement is a funny thing. I will restrict your buying for the good of the home, but then you look up and the same person who's doing the restriction of the other person is out buying new cars, boats, high dollar trips, golfing, yachting, you name it, they're doing it. But then they're telling the other person, we can't afford that. We can't afford that. We've got to look out for the future of the home. We've got to look down the road. But yet, many times, that person who comes from that attitude, that ideology, they're not sacrificing much. And that's going to cause some real problems within the relationship. I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it. It's not something that I'm just extrapolating from research. I'm telling you this is true from observable experience. It just is it's almost a relationship killer. In the book of 1 Kings, chapter 21, verses 1 through 7, quite a lengthy reading, but nonetheless I think it's worth the time. It came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard, which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab king of Samaria. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, Give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house, and I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it. Or, if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money. Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid it to me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto you. And Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased, because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him, for he had said, I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed, and turned away his face, and would eat no bread. But Jezebel his wife came to him, and said unto him, Why is thy spirit so sad that thou eatest no bread? And he said unto her, Because I spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and he said unto me, and I said unto him, Give me the vineyard for money, or else, if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard. And Jezebel his wife said unto him, Dost thou not govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise, eat bread, and let your heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. How can she do that? She kills him. She kills him. And then say, It's yours, baby. Do you see what happens in a relationship when ungodliness creeps in? When one person feels empowered to control another, they just do what they want to do without regard for how it's going to impact the real constellation of the family. I hope that if you know families that are just going back and forth over money, that you might be the compass to help them understand. Typically, the way you see money and the way you fuss over the money and the way you worry about money and the way you handle money is symptomatic of than this relationship. There are people in relationships who come from a financial rung that says, look, I don't have to work for money, or I don't have to work much for money, but I'll always seek out somebody who has a work philosophy of earning, of financial stability. And I'll do them like Jezebel does Naboth. I'll take what they have. Where I'm from in the country, we call that hustling, and we call that a deadbeat. There are marriages that are made up of hustlers and deadbeats, gold diggers, to where the person in the relationship is only concerned about himself or herself, not the real family. And as long as that one person's need is met, centered around finances, they're going to scream and yell and fuss and cuss and be ungodly. But we are about God's business. And in the midst of this pandemic, we should be even more about God's business. Loving each other and being good stewards over that which God has entrusted us with, even in relationships. I want to encourage you to encourage others throughout this pandemic not to fuss and cuss and become about the finances that can lead to the destruction of a relationship. This might be a time for couples to come together, asking for forgiveness for the way that individuals within the relationship have ignored the real call of God for accountability surrounding finances. Will you pray with me? And as we pray today, please keep Sister Leslie McCray in your prayers. In about 30 minutes, she will be in surgery at Washington Hospital Center for the retina in her eye. And it's a critical surgery because depending on the outcome of that surgery, it's going to dictate whether or not she's able to receive a kidney transplant later in maybe this year or the first part of next year. This is a very critical time for her. And also, this is a public service announcement, and you can spread it around to other families in the church. Sister Wilhelmina Taylor is going to be administering flu shots this Sunday, but you need to schedule the shot. You can send me an email at drbem, the number 2, at yahoo.com, or you can send Sister McClure an email at bsmcclure at yahoo.com or at hotmail.com. That's bsmcclure at hotmail.com. But please just let us know your intent to receive this flu shot on Sunday. Now, if you're over I think 63 or 65. You don't have to tell us how much over that age you are. But if you're over 63, 65 years old, just know I'm older than, or put a plus, because there's a higher dosage flu shot for older people. And we just want to make sure that you get the proper flu shot. Please pray with me at this time. Father, we thank you so much for watching over us. We thank you for providing each of us with the daily necessities of life. And Father, I pray that because you've promised us the things of life that sustain life, food, clothing, shelter, that we'll be thankful, and as families, we will refrain from worrying about the future. And Father, I pray that we'll always respect one another and just esteem each other highly for the contribution that a family. I pray for this country in a special way, that you will deliver us from to bring unnecessary oppression and suffering to the citizenry. And Father, at this time, I especially pray for Sister Leslie, that